Depleted uranium weaponry. Depleted uranium, DU, is a byproduct of the uranium enrichment process, which is used to make nuclear weapons and fuel for nuclear power plants. It is a dense metal with a high level of radioactivity and is used in some military applications, particularly armor-piercing ammunition. DU is used in armor-piercing ammunition because of its ability to penetrate heavily armored targets, such as tanks. When a DU penetrator hits a target, it creates a burst of flames that can ignite fuel and ammunition inside the target, causing secondary explosions and fires. This makes it an effective anti-tank weapon. However, the use of DU weapons has raised concerns about the potential health and environmental effects of DU contamination. When DU weapons are fired, they release tiny particles of DU that can be inhaled or ingested by soldiers, civilians, and wildlife in the area. The health effects of DU exposure are a topic of ongoing debate. Some studies have suggested that DU exposure can cause cancer and other illnesses, while others have found no evidence of such effects. The World Health Organization has stated that DU exposure poses a limited risk to human health, but that more research is needed to fully understand the risks. The environmental effects of DU contamination are also a concern. DU particles can remain in the soil for thousands of years, and can contaminate water sources and wildlife. This can have long-term effects on the ecosystem and the health of local populations. In response to these concerns, several countries have taken steps to limit or ban the use of DU weapons. The United Nations has also called for a moratorium on the use of DU weapons until more research is done on their potential health and environmental effects. In conclusion, depleted uranium weaponry has been a controversial issue due to concerns about its potential health and environmental effects. While DU weapons have proven to be effective in some military applications, more research is needed to fully understand their risks and to develop alternative weapons that are less harmful to human health and the environment. Some experts argue that the risks of DU exposure are low compared to other hazards faced by soldiers in combat, such as exposure to explosives and other toxic chemicals. They also point out that DU weapons have been used in many conflicts over the past several decades with no apparent widespread health effects. However, others argue that the risks of DU exposure may be underestimated and that more research is needed to fully understand its potential health effects. They also note that DU contamination can have long-lasting effects on the environment and the health of local populations, which must be taken into account when deciding whether or not to use DU weapons. Several countries, including Germany, Italy, and Belgium, have banned the use of DU weapons, while others, such as the United States and the United Kingdom, continue to use them. In 2020, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution calling for a comprehensive study of the health and environmental effects of DU contamination, and for countries to provide assistance to those affected by DU contamination. In addition to the potential health and environmental effects of DU weapons, there are also concerns about their legality. Some experts argue that the use of DU weapons violates international humanitarian law, particularly the principle of proportionality, which requires that the harm caused by an attack must not outweigh the military objective. They also argue that DU weapons may constitute indiscriminate weapons, which are prohibited under international law. In conclusion, the use of depleted uranium weaponry remains a controversial issue, with concerns about its potential health and environmental effects, as well as its legality. While some argue that the risks of DU exposure are low compared to other hazards faced by soldiers in combat, others believe that more research is needed to fully understand the risks and that alternative weapons should be developed that are less harmful to human health and the environment. The potential dangers of depleted uranium weapons are a subject of ongoing debate and controversy. While some experts argue that the risks of DU exposure are low, others believe that the risks may be underestimated and that more research is needed to fully understand the potential health and environmental effects. Exposure to depleted uranium particles can occur through inhalation or ingestion, and may lead to a variety of health effects, including kidney damage, lung cancer, and other illnesses. There is also evidence that DU exposure may increase the risk of birth defects and other reproductive problems. In addition to the potential health effects, DU contamination can have long-lasting environmental effects, including contamination of soil and water sources, which can have impacts on local ecosystems and wildlife. The use of DU weapons has also raised concerns about their legality under international humanitarian law. Some experts argue that the use of DU weapons violates the principle of proportionality, which requires that the harm caused by an attack must not outweigh the military objective. They also argue that DU weapons may be indiscriminate, as the particles released by these weapons can contaminate large areas and affect civilian populations. Overall, while the potential dangers of depleted uranium weapons are subject to ongoing debate and research, it is clear that there are risks associated with their use that must be carefully considered by military and political leaders. Depleted uranium weapons have been used in several conflicts over the past several decades. The United States and other countries used DU weapons in the Gulf War in 1991 and in the Iraq War in 2003. DU weapons were also used by NATO forces in the Balkans conflict in the 1990s. The use of DU weapons in these conflicts has raised concerns about the potential health and environmental effects of DU contamination on soldiers, civilians, and wildlife in the areas where they were used. Some studies have suggested that DU exposure may be linked to health effects such as cancer, while others have found no such link. Due to these concerns, several countries have taken steps to limit or ban the use of DU weapons. Germany, Italy, and Belgium have banned their use, while other countries such as the United States and the United Kingdom continue to use them. The United Nations has also called for a moratorium on the use of DU weapons until more research is done on their potential health and environmental effects. Despite these concerns and restrictions, DU weapons are still considered by some military leaders to be an effective weapon due to their ability to penetrate armor and destroy enemy targets. However, alternative weapons and tactics are being developed to reduce the need for DU weapons in combat. Efforts are also being made to clean up areas that have been contaminated with DU particles from previous conflicts. This can be a difficult and expensive process, as DU contamination can persist in soil and water sources for many years after the weapons have been used. In addition to the health and environmental effects of DU weapons, their use has also raised ethical and legal questions. Some experts argue that the use of DU weapons violates international humanitarian law, particularly the principle of proportionality, which requires that the harm caused by an attack must not outweigh the military objective. Overall, while depleted uranium weapons have been used in several conflicts over the past several decades, there are ongoing concerns about their potential health and environmental effects, as well as their legality under international law. As such, it remains a controversial issue that must be carefully considered by military and political leaders. Several countries have developed and used depleted uranium, DU, weapons, including the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Russia. These countries have used DU weapons in various conflicts, including the Gulf War in 1991, the Iraq War in 2003, and the Balkans conflict in the 1990s. Other countries, such as China and Israel, are also believed to have developed DU weapons, but their use has not been confirmed. However, some countries, including Germany, Italy, and Belgium, have banned the use of DU weapons due to concerns about their potential health and environmental effects. The use of DU weapons remains a controversial issue, with ongoing debates about their effectiveness in combat, as well as their potential health and environmental effects. Some experts argue that alternative weapons and tactics should be developed that are less harmful to human health and the environment. Depleted uranium, DU, weapons are primarily used by militaries, and their sale and transfer are regulated by international arms control agreements, including the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, CCW. The sale and transfer of DU weapons to non-state actors, such as terrorist groups or militias, is illegal under international law. However, there have been reports of illegal trade in DU weapons and DU containing scrap metal in some countries, which may pose a risk of exposure to DU particles for those involved in handling or processing the material. Additionally, some countries may be stockpiling DU weapons, which could pose a risk if these weapons were to be used or sold in the future. Efforts are being made by international organizations, such as the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, to monitor and regulate the trade and use of DU weapons. Some countries, such as Germany, have also called for a complete ban on the use, production, and trade of DU weapons, while others, such as the United States, continue to use them in certain circumstances. Overall, while the sale and transfer of DU weapons is regulated by international arms control agreements, there have been reports of illegal trade and stockpiling, highlighting the need for continued efforts to monitor and regulate the use of these weapons. Depleted uranium, DU, weapons are primarily used by militaries, and their sale and transfer are regulated by international arms control agreements. However, there have been reports of illegal trade and stockpiling of DU weapons in some countries. The use of DU weapons in conflicts has raised concerns about their potential health and environmental effects, leading some countries to ban their use. Efforts are being made to monitor and regulate the use of DU weapons, but their continued use remains a controversial issue. Thank you for watching this channel.